Hey guys, tonight's story dives into the 2013 Carbanak cyber heist, a massive billion-dollar operation where a team of hackers carried out one of the most sophisticated digital bank robberies in history, stealing nearly $1 billion from banks across the world, all without triggering a single alarm. No guns, no car chases, just a keyboard, some emails, and a level of patience most criminals wouldn't dare try. So before you get comfortable, if you enjoy what I do here, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps me keep making these videos, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the globe. Now, dim the lights, let the fan hum in the background, and let's ease into tonight's story together. July 10th, 2016. A quiet morning in Taipei. Two men walk into the lobby of a small bank. They don't look dangerous, just two guys in medical masks and fisher hats. One stands by the door, eyes scanning the street. The other takes a few slow steps toward the ATM. He doesn't put in a card, doesn't touch any buttons. He just stands there and waits. Then something strange happens. The machine comes to life. Not in the usual way, no beeps, no receipts. It starts pushing out stacks of cash like it's having a nervous breakdown. No warning, no code, no fingerprints. Just clean money sliding out like bread from a toaster. The man grabs the notes. It's almost too easy. But before he can take more, someone enters the bank. A regular person. Just bad timing. The two men take one quick look and vanish. No panic, no shouting. They leave behind a small pile of money on the floor. To the stranger, it probably looked like some weird accident. Maybe a glitch. But that little pile of cash? It was the first crack in a much, much bigger story. Because while those two slipped away, 20 others were doing the same thing across the city. Same trick, same machines, different branches. This wasn't some lucky day for local criminals. It was part of something global, a plan that had been running for years, hidden in code, spread through wires and screens, quiet, precise, and unbelievably profitable. Over 100 banks, more than 30 countries, and almost $1 billion gone. Not with guns, not with masks, but with keyboards. The people behind it called themselves Carbanak, a group of hackers who didn't just steal money, they controlled the banks from the inside, like ghosts in the system. They studied how real employees worked, then they copied them. Emails, mouse movements, even the way they typed. And when the time was right, they struck. But on this night in Taipei, something didn't go as planned. A small misstep. Just one moment of sloppiness. But it was enough. Because that mistake would lead to a long trail, and someone was about to start following it. Carbanak had been invisible until now. But every empire, no matter how smart or quiet, leaves footprints. And this time, they'd left them on camera. This wasn't just another cybercrime. This was the start of one of the biggest digital manhunts the world had ever seen. The real events of this hack were recorded in detail. But the banks that got hit, their names were never made public. Same for the employees. No one wanted the world to know just how bad it got. So for this story, we've made a character. His name is Maxim. That's it. Just Maxim. It's April 8th, a regular Tuesday. The kind of day where nothing seems to happen until it does. Maxim works at a bank in Ukraine. Not a big shot manager, not some coffee-fetching intern. Just a quiet, dependable employee. Shows up on time, doesn't ask for much. But he does have one small problem. He never installs his computer updates. Not because he's lazy, he just finds those pop-ups annoying. That morning, he pours himself a cup of strong coffee and thinks about the receptionist again. The same one he thinks about every Tuesday and every other day too. He's halfway through a daydream when a new email shows up on his screen. It looks like it's from his co-worker Sergey. It comes with an attachment, a Word document. The file has one of those serious names, something that sounds like it belongs in a government office. Compliance with Federal Law 115 dated 2/17/14. Boring. Official. Safe. Maxim clicks. The document opens. A few paragraphs of legal text. He gives it a quick glance, closes it, and moves on. No alarms go off, no weird pop-ups, no sign that anything just happened. To Maxim, it's just another email in another boring workday. But in the background, something has happened. Something quiet. Something invisible. And in a few minutes, the bank's entire network will belong to someone else. A few months pass. Maxim is back at work, sitting through another meeting in a room that smells like burnt coffee and tired ambition. His boss doesn't look good. Eyes puffy, tie crooked, nerves shot. Something's clearly wrong. He starts talking. Slowly, carefully, like he's trying not to shout. Some of the bank's ATMs have been acting strange. Not just glitchy, but really strange. They've been spitting out cash, not after someone enters a PIN, not even when anyone touches them. Just money falling out. At random times, as if the machines had suddenly become generous. People walking by just scooped up the bills. No alarms, no security footage that made sense. The ATMs looked fine on the outside, but clearly something wasn't right on the inside. The word cyber attack comes up, quietly. The kind of word that makes the room colder. The boss says it might be connected to something deeper. Maybe something that's already inside the bank system. He reminds everyone to be careful with their emails. Don't open strange attachments. Don't click links. Don't trust anything that looks even a little bit off. Maxim just stares at the floor. He doesn't say anything. Emails, meetings, warnings. The same story over and over again. One mistake, and suddenly everything's on fire. And for some people, that's the moment it all becomes too much. The pressure, the fear, the nonsense. They start to think about leaving. Not just the job, but the whole system. Because if this is what normal looks like, maybe it's time to build something different. The bank decides it's time to bring in outside help. They hire Kaspersky, a well-known cybersecurity company, to figure out what went wrong. All your ATMs are empty. You know that something has happened. That's Jorant van der Wiel speaking. He's one of the experts on the team. Calm voice, sharp mind. He's seen a lot of strange things in his work, but this one already feels different. Jorant starts by checking the hard drives from the affected ATMs. Standard procedure. If malware got in, it should have left a trace, something, anything. He looks, and finds nothing. No suspicious programs, no broken files, no weird code hiding in the system. It's like the machines were never touched at all. Not a single clue, no logs, no tracks, just silence. For a hacker, that's impressive. For an investigator, it's a nightmare. A few months pass. Then, out of nowhere, Jaunt gets a phone call in the middle of the night. It's exactly 3 a.m. He's barely awake when he hears the voice on the other end, an account manager from a large Russian bank. The man sounds nervous. He says Jaunt needs to get in touch with their IT guy right away. Minutes later, one of Jaunt's co-workers from Kaspersky arrives at the bank. The IT guy is already in a panic. Sweat on his forehead. No time for pleasantries. He says someone has taken over their domain controller. For most people that means nothing, but for anyone working in IT, it's the worst-case scenario. The domain controller is the brain of the entire network. If you control it, you control the whole system. Emails, passwords, everything. And right now it's sending data, not across town but all the way to China. The Kaspersky tech starts digging, looking for anything unusual, and finally he finds something. A strange piece of software hidden deep in the system. It's remote access software, the kind that lets someone else see the screen and move the mouse from far away. That raises a question. Is the hacker watching right now? The specialist gets an idea. He opens a Word document on the infected machine, then types a single word in Russian. Hello. They wait. Nothing happens. Then slowly the cursor begins to move. Letters appear on the screen. You will not catch us. That's the reply. A message from the intruder. Calm, confident. The Kaspersky employee writes back. We will catch you. The hacker answers again. Same message. No, you will not catch us. That's it. No threats, no shouting. Just two people talking through a document in the middle of the night from opposite sides of the world. One trying to hide, the other trying to chase. Strange, yes, but things were only going to get stranger. It doesn't happen overnight. But after a long search, the Kaspersky team finally finds the malware. It's hidden deep in the system, disguised well, and built to leave almost no trace. The code reminds them of something familiar. It looks a lot like the Carbanak Trojan, a dangerous piece of malware that had already done damage in the past. But this version is different, smarter, more flexible, more patient. They find a small configuration file buried inside the malware. It's labeled Anunak. No one really knows what that means. Maybe it was random, maybe it was a joke, but it gives the team a name to work with. They decide to call it Carbanak. That strange night in the Russian bank gives Jaunt and his team exactly what they needed, a starting point. With this clue, they start connecting the dots, back to the empty ATMs in Ukraine, back to Maxim, back to that one click on an innocent-looking document. Piece by piece, the picture becomes clearer. They aren't just dealing with a virus. This is a full operation, planned, organized, global. And now, for the first time, they know what to call it. Let's go back to the beginning. It's April 8th, 2014. One of the Carbanak hackers is already inside Sergei's email account, but that's just the first step. What he really wants is access to Maxim's computer, so he sends an email with a Word file attached. The file looks harmless, boring even, but inside it hides something dangerous. The moment Maxim opens it, the document uses a weakness in Microsoft Word to secretly download malware. That malware opens a back door. Now the hacker can get into Maxim's computer whenever he wants, but one machine isn't enough. He needs access to the entire network, and he already has a plan. He installs a small tool on Maxim's computer. It doesn't steal anything, it just makes the system run slow, just enough to annoy someone. Maxim gets frustrated, calls IT. When the technician arrives, the hacker has already prepared the trap. A keylogger is running in the background. It quietly records every keystroke on the keyboard. The IT guy starts checking the system. To do that, he types in his admin password. The hacker sees it, writes it down, tests it on the domain controller. It works. That one password opens the door to the bank's entire system. Now he can explore the servers, find the computers used for handling money transfers, the ones connected to the ATMs. But he doesn't rush, he doesn't make noise, instead he watches. For months he studies how the employees move the money. Who does what, when, how, every click, every habit. Only after he fully understands the system, he starts to take the money. Quietly, smoothly, one step at a time. The Carbanak group didn't rely on just one trick. They created 3 different ways to steal money, each one smarter than the last. The first method was simple but clever. They would find accounts used for managing daily bank transactions. Then they quietly transfer money out of those accounts and into their own. But before doing that, they added the stolen amount to the account balance. That way the number on the screen didn't change, it looked normal. And since most banks only check these balances every 10 hours or so, no one noticed the theft until it was far too late. The second method was louder. They took direct control of certain ATMs. Not all, just the ones they had already tested. At specific times, they'd order the machines to start releasing cash. No card needed, no PIN, just money spilling out onto the street. Of course, they didn't go collect it themselves. That's what the money mules were for, men hired through contacts in the Moldovan mafia. These mules would stand by the ATMs, grab the cash as it came out, and send it up the chain. In return, they got to keep a small share, not much but enough to keep quiet. The third method was the most advanced. The hackers created fake bank accounts in the names of their mules. Real names, real debit cards, nothing that looked fake on the outside. Each card started with a small balance, maybe $3.33. Then, deep inside the bank's database, the hackers quietly changed that number. They turned $33 into 1,000. In seconds, the balance was updated. The card didn't change. The name didn't change. But now the mule had $1 million ready to be withdrawn at any ATM. All they had to do was use the card like normal. But there was one small problem. Changing the database didn't just affect the fake accounts. Some real customers, poor people with barely anything in their accounts, suddenly became millionaires too, just like that. It didn't last long, of course, but for a few hours the system got confused, and a few strangers woke up rich without ever knowing why. As the Kaspersky team studies more of the Carbanak group's methods, the picture starts to become clearer, and much bigger than expected. This isn't just a few smart hackers playing around. It's a full-scale operation, spread across countries and time zones. At first, the signs were fragmented. Isolated incidents, ATMs behaving strangely, unexplained losses in bank ledgers. But when Kaspersky analyzed the malware embedded in the infected systems, the puzzle pieces began to form a terrifying image. Carbanak wasn't just another financial threat. It was a professional cyber espionage campaign, masquerading as online theft. The malware had layers, complex scripts, modular payloads. It was designed to lie dormant for weeks, sometimes months, gathering information, watching employee routines, understanding every nuance of internal systems. It didn't brute force its way in, it learned, it adapted, and then it attacked with precision. Kaspersky knows they can't handle this alone, so they start working with Europol, major European banks, and law enforcement teams in several countries. The goal is simple: find the hackers and shut them down. But cooperation doesn't make things easy. The attackers didn't leave fingerprints, no obvious aliases, no usernames. Their infrastructure was a maze of proxy servers, rented VPS systems, and bulletproof hosting. When investigators traced command and control domains, they led to accounts registered under fake names, sometimes in Thailand, sometimes in Kenya, sometimes in cloud servers in Panama. Still, some digital breadcrumbs emerge. Analysts begin mapping the command infrastructure, and certain IP clusters begin to repeat. They see common malware signatures, time zone metadata, and linguistic clues buried in the code comments, Russian. The assumption that this group might be based in Eastern Europe turns into something closer to certainty. At first, there's progress. Some of the servers used by the group are tracked and taken offline. That slows things down for a moment, but only for a moment, because the group doesn't rely on a fixed infrastructure. As soon as one node goes dark, another lights up. In some cases, their attacks pause for no more than a few hours. Then they're back. New servers, new phishing lures, same strategy. The hackers adapt quickly. They switch to new tools. They move their operations. And just like that, they disappear back into the shadows. Still working, still stealing, still miles ahead. In one instance, investigators managed to intercept the malware's outbound connection to a remote desktop controller. What they saw wasn't code, it was surveillance. Real-time monitoring of bank employees. The hackers were watching everything: logins, transaction approvals, internal chats. They weren't just stealing credentials, they were rehearsing the crime. By early 2015, Carbanak has already hit at least 100 banks and financial groups in nearly 30 countries. Most of the targets are in Russia, but there are also attacks in the United States, China, and across Europe. It's not small-time crime anymore, and yet, strangely, the banks aren't always willing to admit what's happening. The financial world runs on trust. Publicly acknowledging that hackers infiltrated your systems, that's a branding nightmare. So many of the breaches go unreported. Quiet fixes are made. Internal audits are launched. But the silence only helps Carbanak. They steal money, and no one talks about it. Over the span of 2 years, they steal close to $1 billion, and they do it without stepping into a single bank. The numbers vary depending on the institution. Some banks lose a few 100,000, others several million. But the tactics are eerily similar. A fake resume sent to an HR email, a Word doc with malicious macros, a silent installation, weeks of observation, then, click. The hackers, using legitimate credentials and internal access, initiate real transactions, transfers from the bank's own internal systems approved by its own processes. From the outside, nothing looks unusual. The logs are clean, the software is trusted, the amounts are realistic. But behind the scenes, Carbanak is draining institutions dry one by one. From the outside, they seem unstoppable, smart, careful, invisible. Even among the most seasoned cyber investigators, there's a quiet sense of awe. This isn't just about money. It's about how vulnerable the global financial system really is. That a group with no uniforms, no weapons, no physical presence could compromise major institutions in multiple countries, all from behind a keyboard. The deeper the investigation goes, the more unsettling it becomes. Some of the malware samples reveal commands written for Swift messaging systems, used for international wire transfers. Others show modules built for ATM management software. One variant could manipulate internal accounting databases, making it appear that money was still there, even after it had been transferred out. Investigators start sharing technical indicators with one another. They compile Yara rules to catch the malware. They develop internal signatures and deploy threat detection on enterprise-level systems. But Carbanak is always just a few steps ahead, switching up code, recompiling binaries, and rewriting payloads to stay undetected. The group's operational security is tight. Even their phishing emails are good, grammatically correct, culturally accurate, sometimes even using real names and job titles stolen from LinkedIn. This wasn't spam. It was targeted, deliberate, and professional. And yet, something starts to shift. As more institutions come forward, the scope of the damage becomes harder to hide. Confidential reports begin circulating within cybersecurity circles. The FBI gets involved. So does Interpol. A coalition begins to form, not just to study the malware, but to hunt the people behind it. But every operation has a weak point, and while no one knows exactly when or where it will happen, the investigators are patient, because all it takes is one mistake. The first bank in Taiwan reported a serious problem. More than 70 million new Taiwan dollars had been stolen. The withdrawals happened across 34 ATMs and 20 branches in both Taipei and Taichung. It was July 2016. Carbanak had launched a new attack, but this time they picked the wrong place. At first it looked like just another glitch, some unusual ATM activity, a little cash missing, but within hours it became clear this wasn't a system error, it was a heist. And it was big. More than $80 million in new Taiwan currency had vanished from machines across the island in just 2 days. But no ATMs had been physically broken into, no cards were used, no accounts were compromised. The machines had simply started spitting out cash on their own. Taiwanese police reacted faster than anyone expected. Within hours, more than 500 officers were on the case. They pulled surveillance footage from every affected branch, and then, inch by inch, they began to rewind the story. On grainy footage, they spotted men standing beside the ATMs, not inserting cards, not typing pins, just standing there. And then the machines started spitting out money. Some of the mules tried to be subtle. They'd collect the cash calmly, tuck it into a backpack, and walk away like nothing had happened. Others weren't so careful, grabbing stacks of notes in broad daylight. Some even wore baseball caps and sunglasses, as if that would help in a country where their faces were already starting to appear on every news channel. In total, 22 people had been deployed to collect the money. Most were Russian nationals. A few came from Eastern Europe, Romania, Moldova, Latvia, Belarus. The plan was tight, efficient, and global. The mules had been flown in on commercial flights just days before the attack. They were booked into hotel rooms across Taipei and Taichung. Each had a specific route, a timing sheet, and a list of machines to hit. 19 of them managed to slip out of the country before the alarm truly sounded. But 3 of them, whether by mistake or delay, were still on the island, and they were carrying bags full of stolen cash. Their faces were everywhere, on TV, in newspapers, plastered across the internet. They needed to vanish, but first, they had to lose the money. One mule panicked. He stuffed 2 sports bags full of cash and rushed to Donghu Park. He ducked under a bridge and buried the bags in the bushes. Then he tried to disappear into the quiet hills of Yong County. It didn't work. Police tracked him down and marched him back to the park. When they dug through the undergrowth, they found the hiding spot, but only 1 bag was still there. The second, gone. An elderly man walking through the park had stumbled across it. 2 duffel bags overflowing with banknotes. Maybe he thought it was lost. Maybe he thought it was a gift. Maybe he just didn't ask questions. Either way, he took it home. By the time police figured it out, he was already sitting on his porch, watching the news with millions in cash under his kitchen table. Back in the city, another mule, known only by his codename Bobby, had a different plan. He took 2 heavy suitcases filled with bundles of cash and slipped into Taipei Central Station. There he found 2 storage lockers, slid the suitcases in, locked the doors, and vanished. Not long after, 2 more men landed in Taiwan. They moved with precision, headed straight from the airport to the station, retrieved the bags and checked into a quiet hotel. Everything was running on schedule. Then came brunch. That afternoon, the 2 men sat down for a meal. Nothing fancy, just a bite before their next move. But they never got to eat. The police were already outside. Put down the knife and fork. Stay calm. Don't move. Come with us. No shouting, no guns, no drama. Just firm voices, calm hands, and cold metal cuffs. The suspects were escorted back to their hotel. There, inside the room, investigators found it. Stacks of cash, piles of bills stuffed into drawers, under the bed, hidden inside suitcases. Nearly $1.5 million, packed and ready to vanish again. In the end, Taiwanese authorities recovered 90% of the stolen money. They moved fast, acted smart, and beat the odds. The 3 mules caught on the ground were sentenced to just over 4 years in prison. But no one really cared about them. They weren't the masterminds, they were errand boys. Pickups and drop-offs, hands without heads. The real win came from what one of them left behind. A phone. At first glance it looked like any other burner. But inside were fragments, photos of cash, euros, rubles, dollars, notes in different languages, contact names, timing instructions, and emails. Carefully written, some encrypted, others not. And one of those emails stood out. It linked back to something bigger, someone bigger, a controller, possibly the man behind the entire Carbanak group. The Taipei operation had started as a local mystery, a strange glitch, a smart theft. But by the time investigators were done, it had become a doorway, the first real crack in Carbanak's armor. Soon, Europol joined the investigation. So did the FBI. Cybercrime units across Asia, Europe, and North America started comparing notes. Bits of code from previous attacks matched the ones used in Taiwan. Malware signatures overlapped. IP addresses that had once meant nothing were suddenly full of meaning. Taiwan had done more than recover money. They had pulled a thread, and at the other end of it was the spider. But the spider was already long gone. He'd boarded his plane before the police even knew the web was there. While mules scrambled and officers searched hotel rooms, the real architect of the attack was sipping coffee somewhere quiet, relaxed, rich, comfortable, a millionaire thanks to someone else's passwords. March 6th, 2018. This is Dennis. He's Ukrainian but now lives in Alicante, Spain, with his wife and young son. A quiet man, keeps to himself, doesn't go out much. Most days he stays home writing code. Dennis moved to Spain around 2013, blending into the local expat community and setting up a seemingly normal family life. But behind closed doors, he was at the helm of a cyber heist campaign that had drained banks of nearly $1 billion using malware known as Carbanak and Cobalt. His apartment overlooked the coast, but from inside, his world existed in command and control panels, encryption scripts, and automated cash-out routines. Right now, as usual, he's working on malware. He's good at it, one of the best. Not just another guy in a hoodie. He writes software that takes down banks. Tools he developed allowed remote access to internal bank networks, manipulation of ATM controls, falsification of database entries, and clandestine cash transfers. This wasn't amateur hour, it was industrial-scale cybercrime. To stay off the radar, Dennis avoids cash. He does most of his spending in Bitcoin. At the time, he held around 15,000 BTC. In 2018, that added up to about $162 million. Today, it would be worth over $1 billion. But there's a catch. Bitcoin is great for staying anonymous online. It's not so great when you're trying to buy a house or a fancy car. Most sellers don't want to be paid in digital coins. So for those big purchases, Dennis had to use regular money. And that's what gave him away. Europol and Spanish police had been gathering financial intelligence for months, tracking crypto exchange withdrawals, watchlist flagged transactions, and correspondence between shell companies. Every big purchase, luxury BMWs, real estate, jewelry, started to light up the digital trail. The police started following the trail, quietly, step by step, and one day they found him. On March 26, 2018, Spanish authorities executed an operation in Alicante. Dennis's apartment door was unlocked, the laptop powered on. They found him hunched over the keyboard, as if they'd caught him mid-task. Forensics teams moved in, cloning hard disks, capturing RAM, and copying everything. Malware source code, logs, Bitcoin wallets. They also seized material assets that matched the trail. 2 BMWs, fine jewelry worth around $500,000, apartments valued near $1 million, plus millions in various currencies, and over 15,000 Bitcoins. Despite the haul, most of the stolen whale dollars was still missing, spread across international wallets, shell accounts, and reinvested assets hidden deep in crypto. Dennis K. may have been the brain behind Carbanak, but he didn't work alone. Investigators estimate the team was between 10 to 30 individuals: programmers, infrastructure managers, money launderers, mule network coordinators. Each member played a role in the heist empire he built. Some of the same malware Dennis coded has also been seen in attacks beyond banks, targeting restaurants, point-of-sale systems, hotels. Code doesn't carry ID. You can't handcuff a line of script. And though Dennis was caught, the software he wrote, Carbanak, Cobalt, and their successor modules, lived on, used by other groups. Later that year, in late 2018, 3 more Ukrainians linked to the operation were arrested in a collaborative sweep involving Spanish and Ukrainian authorities. By now, groups like Carbanak, Carbon Spider, Fin7, Joker Stash, and Cobalt Spider had become household names for international cybercrime. Analysts observed overlaps in code, infrastructure, and tactics. Some tied operations back to organized crime networks, and even hinted at linkages with Russian state interests. Whether for money, espionage, or disruption, the lines between profit-driven crime and geopolitical sabotage were blurring. Because from a distance, it's hard to tell where the crime ends and the politics begin. The system Dennis built, and the empire he led, wasn't just about making millions, it was a weapon, a tool, and in the murky world of state-sanctioned cyber activity, the consequences were only just beginning. Maxim's bank lost millions. Looking back, it didn't have to happen. It could have been stopped early, easily. The Carbanak group used a weakness in Microsoft Word, a known problem. one that had already been fixed 3 years earlier. But the patch only works if someone installs it. Maxim didn't. He was busy. Emails, meetings, coffee, daydreams, the update reminder popped up. He closed it, maybe more than once, and that's all it took. A few clicks, ignored. A few warnings, dismissed. And just like that, the bank was open to one of the most advanced cyber attacks in history. This wasn't some zero-day mystery. It was CVE 2012-0158, a memory corruption flaw in Word that let attackers run malicious code on unsuspecting computers. Microsoft released a patch back in October 2012. It had been publicly documented, but once the Carbanak spear phishing email arrived, disguised as a legitimate internal memo, Maxim opened the document anyway. Macros ran, shellcode executed, and a backdoor was dropped, giving Carbanak a direct line into the bank. Because once they were in, they didn't stop at one point. They moved sideways. They elevated privileges. They deployed lateral movement tools to reach the server clusters that controlled ATMs and the Swift messaging channels. Some versions even tried further Windows exploits, like CVE 2013-3360, to gain admin rights. All because one forgotten patch left a door unlatched. The irony? The vulnerability was old news. Researchers at Kaspersky documented the same exploit vector across multiple banks in 2013-2014. They saw how word-based malware gave Carbanak the initial foothold. In hundreds of cases, the cause was the same, unpatched Office installations. But patching isn't automatic. It requires politics, processes, and people actually clicking update. At Maxim's bank, IT had deferred several rounds citing system compatibility checks. Networks administrators delayed because reports need validation. So the remediation just drifted, week after week, quarter after quarter. In the end, staff never felt the urgency until it was too late. Because once the Carbanak backdoor was in place, all bets were off. Investigators later recovered logs showing the malware detected when Word launched, replaced visible text, and phoned home to a command and control server. Then it dropped more modules, set up persistence, created scheduled tasks, and triggered remote desktop services, planting roots deep in bank systems. In one case, a bank's patch logs showed the exact vulnerability had been remedied, but a test environment was left unpatched. Carbanak used that as a staging ground. From there it spread, uninhibited, into production. It wasn't just sloppy security, it was negligence, and it cost millions. Maxim kept thinking. He closed that update window dozens of times. He thought, I'll do it later. He didn't, and neither did anyone else. Which brings us back to this simple lesson. Sometimes the biggest disasters start with the smallest decisions. A choice to postpone, a click that never happened, a patch left uninstalled. It sounds silly, but sometimes the biggest disasters start with the smallest decisions, and in this case that small decision made millions disappear. The Carbanak hackers stole their fortune from behind screens. No masks, no guns, no alarms. But in 2006, a crew in Argentina pulled off a bank job the old-fashioned way, face-to-face, inside the vault, and they walked out without firing a single shot. It's January 13th, 2006. A warm summer Friday in Buenos Aires, the kind of day where the air feels still and nothing seems out of place, until 12:38 p.m. That's when a call came through to the Buenos Aires police. Bank Rio, one of the most prestigious banks in the country, sitting quietly in the upscale neighborhood of Acasuso, was being robbed. Officers rushed to the scene, fast. Within minutes they had surrounded the building. Rifles drawn, radios crackling, sirens off. Inside, they were told, there were 4 armed men holding 23 people hostage. The police locked down the perimeter. There were only 2 ways in or out, and both were now under watch, heavily. Negotiations began. Long conversations through a phone passed between hands. The robbers weren't shouting. They were polite, calm, almost too calm. They said they didn't want to hurt anyone. They asked for pizza and soda. They chatted about their demands. Nothing out of the ordinary for a hostage situation. Just time and patience. But then, at 7 p.m., everything changed. The line went dead. No voices, no movement. After a few tense minutes, the tactical team stormed in. What they found was surreal. The hostages? Safe, unharmed, calm even. The vault? Ransacked. Over 140 safe deposit boxes cracked open and emptied. Jewelry, Cash, bonds, gold, gone. But the thieves? Nowhere. No gunman, no footprints, no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no open doors. And remember, police had been watching the building for more than 6 hours. Not a single soul had come out. The robbers had vanished into thin air. The officers stood in silence, staring at the empty vault like they were in a magic trick they didn't sign up for. What just happened? How did 4 men rob one of the most secure banks in Argentina under full police lockdown and then simply... The world would soon learn this wasn't a simple robbery. It was something else entirely. A masterpiece. Banco Rio, now Banco Santander Rio, wasn't just any bank, it was one of Argentina's financial giants, with branches dotted across the country like pins on a map. And one of those branches sat quietly in San Isidro, an affluent suburb just north of Buenos Aires. This wasn't your average neighborhood. We're talking about a place with more golf courses than gas stations, sailing clubs, tennis courts, a jockey club, the works. It's the kind of place where people whisper at dinner parties and mow their lawns in polos. You wouldn't expect chaos here, but in 2006 Argentina wasn't exactly new to chaos. Just 7 years earlier, in the town of Ramallo, something had happened that changed the way the entire country looked at bank robberies. A group of armed thieves had stormed a bank, taken hostages and tried to use them as human shields during their escape. Police panicked. Shots were fired. 2 innocent hostages were killed on live television. One of the robbers too. It was national trauma, broadcast in real time. Every household watched it unfold on their TV screens. Blood, screaming, disbelief. After that, police were put on notice. Take it slow, avoid another tragedy. So when the call came in about Banco Rio being hit, and the first officers pulled up to that quiet street in San Isidro, there was no rush to storm the building. Not this time. This time they were going to be careful. And besides, they weren't worried. They had the place surrounded. 2 exits, both covered. More than 100 officers stationed around the perimeter. Snipers on rooftops. Sharpshooters in alleys. News vans crowding the street. Cameras rolling live. The scene was locked down so tight you couldn't get a pizza delivered to the front door without showing ID. The consensus: the robbers were trapped. There was no way out. At least, that's what everyone thought. Inside Banco Rio, one of the thieves had chosen a code name, not El Lobo or Pantera or anything remotely stylish. No, he went with Walter, just Walter, like an accountant who drinks lukewarm coffee and argues about printer ink. But Walter had style in his own way. He wore a neat grey suit, spoke politely, and handled negotiations with the police like he was hosting a brunch rather than orchestrating a high-stakes hostage standoff. That's why the press started calling him the man in the grey suit. From the outside, it looked like the robbers were cooperating. They released the bank's security guard first, unharmed. Then a young man. Then a young woman. No threats, no bloodshed, just quiet, calm exits. Walter kept the mood surprisingly light. He smiled often. He joked. At one point, after learning that it was one bank employee's birthday, he and the crew actually sang Feliz Cumpleaños to the poor guy, who awkwardly clapped along in a room full of guns and pizza boxes. Yes, pizza boxes. Around 3:30 p.m, Walter phoned the police with an odd request. "The hostages are getting hungry," he said. "Send over a few pizzas." It sounded like a joke, it wasn't. But after that call, Walter stopped answering. Silence. For the next 3 hours, not a single word came from inside the bank. The phones just rang and rang. Walter had ghosted them. Police didn't know what to do. Storming the building was risky. No one wanted another Ramallo, but sitting on their hands wasn't working either. They were stuck in a kind of polite standoff limbo, like teenagers waiting for a text back that would never come. Eventually, they couldn't wait any longer. At 7 p.m, special forces moved in. They burst through the front, climbed the stairs, and swept the floors with military precision. What they found was weird. The hostages, 23 of them, were split into 3 different areas: the main lobby, the mezzanine, and a conference room in the basement, all alive, all unharmed. Some had been locked in, others simply left sitting in silence. The robbers? Gone, vanished. Officers searched every corner. They even suspected the thieves might be hiding in plain sight, dressed as hostages. But no matter how many times they counted, the same conclusion kept coming up. They weren't there. Then in the basement, police found the real crime scene, the vault. Of the 400 safety deposit boxes made of thick reinforced steel, 14 free had been pried open. Not just opened, but surgically emptied. Gold, diamonds, jewelry, cash, everything gone. The standoff was never real. It was a performance, and the cops, they'd been played. So why didn't the robbers just take the cash from the registers and run? Because in Argentina, especially in 2006, cash inside a bank was basically cursed. You see, back in 2001, Argentina's entire economy decided to spontaneously combust. The country faced one of the worst financial collapses in modern history. Banks froze, accounts were wiped clean, people's savings vanished like a magician's coin trick, only less fun and with way more crying. After that, no one in their right mind trusted banks. Keeping your money in a bank account? That was like handing your dog to a stranger and hoping they bring it back someday. No, Argentinians got smarter. They stopped trusting bank ledgers and started stuffing their valuables into safe deposit boxes. Jewelry, cash, inheritance gold, Rolex collections, loose emeralds, you name it. If it glittered, it got locked away underground. And San Isidro wasn't just any neighborhood. This was upper crust territory. Gated mansions, imported rugs, personal trainers for their poodles. So you can imagine what they were stuffing into those little metal boxes. The robbers knew this. They didn't want cash from a till. They wanted fortunes handed down through generations. Heirlooms, not pocket change. And they got it. By the time the police entered the vault, 143 boxes had been surgically opened. No damage to the walls, no sign of brute force. Just quiet, clean extractions like an art heist in slow motion. All that was left behind, a battery pack, a strange, specialized tool police guessed had been used to open the boxes. And then, a row of toy guns. Yes, toy guns. Turns out the crew had pulled off the entire operation with nothing more threatening than plastic replicas and a great poker face. And then there was the note, typed, laminated, and taped neatly to the wall like the final line of a play. In a neighborhood of rich people, without weapons or grudges, it's just money, not love. Depending on who you asked, it was either profound or pretentious or both. The press loved it. The country, even more so. News channels looped the footage for hours. Every Argentine living room had become a true crime watch party. And by the end, everyone seemed to agree on one thing. The thieves hadn't just pulled off a heist. They'd staged a performance. No shots fired, no one hurt. A clean getaway. They became instant folk heroes. The Argentine Robin Hoods. If Robin Hood had kept all the money for himself and maybe moved to a beach in Uruguay. And now the million-dollar question, who were these people? And how had they pulled off the greatest heist in Argentine history, with nothing but toy guns and time on their side? As it turns out, the man behind the so-called robbery of the century wasn't some elite criminal mastermind trained by ex-KGB operatives. He was just Fernando Araujo, a guy who liked art, and martial arts, and weed. Fernando had been stewing over the infamous Ramallo bank robbery, the one where the thieves took hostages and then got absolutely obliterated trying to walk out the front door. Everyone remembered the bodies, the TV cameras, the national trauma. But Fernando? He saw something else. He saw potential. Because to him they'd almost nailed it. They had the plan, the nerve, the location. They just messed up the exit. So one day, during a smoke-heavy brainstorming session with his childhood friend, he said the quiet part out loud. What if, he said, eyes red and brilliant, we don't walk out the front door? What if we just disappear? Not metaphorically, literally, disappear through a hole. His friend Sebastian Garcia Bolster half listened while sipping mate. He nodded, like you do when someone's talking nonsense at 2 a.m. after 3 bong hits and a bad breakup. Because to Sebastian, this was all just stoner chatter. Fernando was always dreaming up wild stuff, and besides, Sebastian had a mortgage, a wife, a kid, and 0 criminal record. He fixed lawnmowers for a living. This wasn't his lane. Still, they'd known each other forever. Grew up together in Buenos Aires north suburbs, quiet, tree-lined streets, middle-class homes, not exactly the breeding ground of professional bank robbers. Fernando, though, he didn't really fit into any mold, a little too eccentric to hold down a 9-to-5. He taught martial arts sometimes, painted when he felt like it, smoked like it was a job, and after a recent breakup he decided the world had hurt him enough. So he blacked out the windows of his apartment, sealed off the sunlight, and stewed in isolation like some tragic poet with a black belt. He wasn't dangerous, he wasn't desperate, but he was bored. And boredom, when mixed with brains, heartbreak and illegal horticulture, can be very dangerous indeed. People who knew Fernando Araujo said he didn't eat much, slept when he felt like it. He was often high, always pale, lived like a vampire with a Netflix addiction. If there was a sun out, he ignored it. If there was a strange idea to chase, he followed it. And his favorite obsession? Bank heists. The man devoured anything about robberies, movies, documentaries, late-night talk shows where some retired thief spilled his secrets like bedtime stories. But Araujo wasn't watching for fun. He was studying, taking notes, pausing scenes, fast-forwarding to the mistakes. Why? So he could avoid them. By 2004, Fernando believed he had the perfect plan. No cops, no blood, no mistakes. But he also knew he wasn't a one-man show. For the heavy lifting, he needed someone with actual brains in the wires and engines department. So he went to the guy who had once laughed off his hole-in-the-wall plan, Sebastian Garcia Bolster. Now, Bolster wasn't exactly excited. He'd worked in a bank before, knew how tight the security was. Alarms, codes, reinforced doors, it wasn't a playground. But Fernando had two selling points. One, nobody would get hurt. And two, they wouldn't even use real weapons. That calmed Bolster down just enough. Plus, he was still furious about how the banks had screwed his father and grandfather. Like a lot of Argentinians, he had a grudge that went back generations. Money disappeared, savings were wiped, and bankers walked away in suits. So maybe, just maybe, stealing from a bank wasn't the worst thing. He joined the plan. And then, the planning really started. The idea was as bold as it was ridiculous. Dig a tunnel under the bank, come up inside, and take what you want. Luckily for them, Buenos Aires had something most cities didn't. A web of old storm drains underneath the streets, many of which spilled right into the river. These drains ran all over the city, including near the Bank Rio branch in San Isidro. So they'd use one of those to get close, then tunnel upward. But there was a problem bigger than dirt and concrete: the alarm system. At night, the system was armed, trip a motion sensor, and the whole neighborhood would light up. So how do you rob a bank without setting off the alarm? Easy. You don't break in at night. You rob it during the day, when the doors are open, when customers are lining up to make deposits, when the alarm is off, while the city is watching, and no one's really watching you. How do you rob a bank in broad daylight, spend hours downstairs cracking open safe deposit boxes, and not have the cops storm in? In Fernando Araujo's mind, the solution was obvious. You stage a fake robbery upstairs, a decoy holdup, loud, chaotic, dramatic, guns in the air, fake ones, hostages on the floor, maybe a demand for pizza or two. That would keep police busy at the front door while the real loot quietly disappeared from the basement below, somewhere in that haze of weed smoke and tunnel dust. Someone might have even said it. It's so crazy it just might work. From there the plan snowballed. They needed a crew, an Ocean's 11 sort of lineup, but with less Las Vegas and more basement humidity. First came Doc, a seasoned bank robber with nerves of steel and a CV that probably shouldn't be read out loud in a courtroom. Alongside him was his longtime partner in crime, Ruben Alberto de la Torre, aka Beto. Both had been part of a notorious gang called Superbanda, which might have been the most unimaginative name in Argentinian crime history, but they got the job done. Then came the rest of the misfits, a fixer, a getaway driver, and most importantly, the man with the cash. Enter Luis Mario Vitet Solanas, a retired Uruguayan thief with a taste for theatrics and a wallet fat enough to invest $100,000 into the operation. Luis wasn't just funding the show, he was part of it. With money flowing in, Bolster could now get creative with the engineering. First problem: how do you open 400 reinforced safe deposit boxes without drawing attention upstairs? Bolster came up with a plan as meticulous as it was ridiculous. He rented a safe deposit box at another Banco Rio branch just like any normal customer, and took note of the model and brand. Then he got a few of those boxes for himself, like someone casually ordering a few coffins to test the hinges. After weeks of trial and error, he settled on a jackhammer. But not just any jackhammer, a custom-built one that could be broken down into smaller parts, carried into the bank piece by piece, and reassembled in the basement like an IKEA project from hell, loud enough to break steel, quiet enough not to alert the people 2 floors up. Next issue, escape. Dragging dozens of kilos of loot back through a filthy underground tunnel was bad enough. But the real problem? The water. The storm drains they were tunneling through ended in a canal, but the water level there was too low. Zodiac boats would scrape the bottom, or worse, tip over. Bolster's solution: build a dam, not metaphorically, literally. He designed a wooden dam in his workshop, disassembled it into transportable chunks, and then over the course of several late nights reassembled the whole thing inside the storm drain. a handcrafted floodgate hidden beneath the streets of Buenos Aires. To recap, they had fake cops, fake guns, a fake hold-up upstairs, a tunnel downstairs, a jackhammer built like a transformer. And now, thanks to a man who once fixed lawnmowers for a living, they had the power to raise water levels underground. It was becoming less of a bank job and more of a magic trick. And no one, not even the police, saw it coming. The morning of the heist, 7 men met up for coffee. Not to clink glasses like in a Hollywood montage, but to caffeinate, because even career criminals need a little espresso before stealing millions. They sat around sipping their cortados like any group of early risers, except instead of going to work, they were about to pull off the most famous bank job in Argentina's history. Then they split up. Luis and Beto had separated the hostages, locked them in different rooms, and made sure no one could see or hear what was happening below. Back underground, Bolster was crouched in the shadows beneath the bank, calmly waiting at the mouth of the tunnel he'd spent weeks digging. Dust in his hair, tools in his bag, heartbeat slow. A few moments later, Doc slipped into the basement, found the weak spot in the wall, and quietly knocked it open from the inside. Bolster stepped through like a man showing up late to his own party. No alarms went off. No one upstairs knew. That's because everything was already under control. Then came Europol. He walked up to the entrance wearing what can only be described as the disguise of a man having a crisis in a costume shop. Blonde wig, baseball cap, ski mask and sunglasses. He looked like a rejected backup dancer for Daft Punk. No one stopped him. Why would they? Outside, he'd parked a third stolen car intentionally in plain view, just enough to look suspicious, just enough to scream, "This is how we're leaving." It was bait for the cops. Clean suits, calm faces. Like they were there to install air conditioning, not rob the place blind. Doc and Beto, the frontline duo, took a more dramatic approach. They burst through the bank's main entrance like it was a movie set. Beto brandishing a plastic toy gun, bright red, absurdly fake, the same one he'd borrowed that morning from his 9-year-old son's toy chest. Somehow, miraculously, it worked. No questions asked. Customers and employees hit the floor like it was second nature. Sebastian Bolster, the quiet mechanic with a thing for jackhammers and dams, disappeared into the sewers beneath the city, heading for the storm drain that led directly under the bank. Meanwhile, getaway driver Julian Salo Cheverria rolled out in one of the stolen cars, casually parking it at a nearby escape spot, just in case Plan A didn't pan out. Vitet and a still mysterious figure known only as Luis the Uruguayan rolled into the bank's underground garage in another stolen vehicle. Upstairs, Vitet stepped into character. Slick suit, calm voice, grey tie. He introduced himself to the police as Walter, the so-called man in the grey suit. His job? Make it look like your standard botched stick-up. Tense negotiations, fake demands, pizza requests, anything to stall the cops. Outside, the street was swarming with officers and cameras. Inside, the hostages were quiet, the robbers were humming along, and in the basement, the real heist had just begun. Arroyo's plan was as bold as it was absurd. Stage a noisy, chaotic fake robbery upstairs to mask the silent real one unfolding beneath their feet. While the police outside nervously clutched their radios and tried not to cause another Ramallo, Vitet was upstairs releasing hostages one at a time, a security guard, a young man, a woman, just enough to make it look like things were going well, that if they just waited a little longer the robbers would surrender. Classic psychological rope-a-dope. Meanwhile, downstairs the clock was ticking. The crew had been given 2 hours, start to finish. Bolster, calm as a surgeon, pieced together his homemade jackhammer in under 20 minutes, and spent the next 90 cracking open box after box. The reinforced steel groaned, locks gave out, and the loot piled up. Then Araujo gave the signal. Vitet leaned into the phone and casually told police, "Order us some pizzas." Then he put the phone down, told the hostages to stay put unless they wanted to die, and slipped into the basement. Down there, things were getting weird. As Bolster cracked open the last few boxes, Beto and Vitet joined in bagging up jewelry, cash, and whatever else they could find. Meanwhile, Araujo and Doc weren't grabbing loot. They were creating chaos. They emptied bleach bottles all over the crime scene to kill off any DNA. Then, just to mess with the forensic team, they scattered human hair across the basement, hair they'd collected from a local barbershop. Because nothing says go investigate someone else, like 47 strands of mystery mullet. Once the bags were full and the boxes empty, the men sealed the hole they'd made in the basement wall, moved a giant shelving unit in front of it, and disappeared down the tunnel like sewer-dwelling magicians. But this being an Argentine heist, something had to go wrong. The Zodiacs were waiting, but the outboard motor had died. So Araujo, always thinking ahead, handed out paddles. The gang quietly rowed down the storm drain like a very illegal Boy Scout troop. 10 blocks later, they surfaced at the predetermined extraction point, hauled the bags up through a hidden pulley system, and loaded everything into the waiting van. By the time the police finally stormed the bank, red-faced and sweating under the afternoon sun, the thieves were already home, feet up, TV on, pizza in hand, watching the chaos unfold in real time. Meanwhile, Bolster, not one to waste a good decoy, grabbed a handful of stolen credit cards, ones that couldn't be used or traced, and scattered them like confetti across half the city. Every time someone picked one up and tried to use it, police would swarm the location, only to find out they'd chased a dead lead. It was like a scavenger hunt designed by a sociopath. Hours later, surrounded by useless evidence, confused witnesses and fake guns, the authorities realized something terrible. They'd been tricked, live on television. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a full-blown public humiliation. So how do we know all of this? The plans, the fake guns, the tunnels, the rainwater? Simple. One man, one ego, one terrible husband. After the heist, Beto got home, high on adrenaline, and bragged. Told his wife Alicia everything, the score, the loot, even where it was hidden. Bad move, because Beto had a habit, cheating, loudly, often, and when Alicia had enough, she flipped. She told the cops, names, roles, details, everything. They arrested Beto weeks later, mid-drive, with a mistress beside him. The rest of the crew fell fast, only Doc and Louis slipped away. Alicia never saw them. The trials were dramatic. The sentences, light, no guns, no injuries, just pure embarrassment. Today most are free, the story lives on, and the question remains, would you pull it off, or tell the wrong person, at the worst possible time? The Bank Rio gang pulled off their heist of the century, with tunnel digging, fake weapons, and even ordering pizza for hostages, masterfully theatrical and daring. Now step into Belfast, December 2004, where another team turned intimidation into art. They took hostages the night before, forced employees to open vaults under duress, and made off with £26.5 million. It wasn't flashy, it was chillingly effective. It starts with a knock. Kevin McMullen, a quiet bank manager from Belfast, hears it late one evening. When he opens the front door, 2 men in police uniforms are standing there, calm, professional, serious. They say there's been an accident, something about his wife's family, a body to identify, an emergency. Kevin doesn't question it. He steps outside. Wrong move. The gun is pushed hard against the back of his head. Inside the house, his wife Karen is grabbed around the neck. Not a word is spoken. Not at first. They aren't cops. They're here for something else. 20 miles away, another home, another target. Chris Ward, who also works at the Northern Bank, is staring down the barrel of a gun. His family sits frozen in place, hostages in their own living room. The message is simple: follow orders or watch them die. For the next 24 hours, Kevin and Chris will live a nightmare with polite smiles on their faces. They'll wake up, get dressed, go to work at the bank like everything is fine, and when they walk through the front doors, no one will suspect a thing, because that's the plan. That morning, December 20th, 2004, 2 ordinary men walked into the Northern Bank, carrying the weight of their families' lives on their backs. And before the day ended, they helped pull off the biggest bank robbery in UK history. No alarms, no masks, no shouting, just quiet instructions, cold threats and nerves of steel. By the time the vault was opened and the last stack of cash loaded into crates, £26.5 million had disappeared, gone without a trace, gone without a single fingerprint. Not a single robber was arrested. Not a single pound was ever officially recovered. Years passed, then more years, and now, 2 decades later, the mystery is still alive. The families were silenced, the robbers vanished, the money still out there somewhere. This is the story of the Northern Bank robbery, a crime so smooth, so quiet, so perfect, it still echoes in police files and empty vaults. It's a quiet evening in West Belfast. Inside a small living room, the Ward family is gathered around the TV. Chris is there with his parents, his older brother and his girlfriend. They're watching football, something they've done 100 times before. Nothing unusual, just a normal night, until the knock. Chris gets up and heads to the door. Outside stands a man, clean clothes, friendly face, easy smile. "All right, Chris," the man says casually. "I'm here to talk about Celtic." That's all it takes to lower Chris's guard. Celtic Football Club. His club. He's a proud supporter. He's active in the fan community, always helping out with tickets, events, local gatherings. It's not the first time someone's turned up asking about match day, so he opens the door wider. That's when he notices them. Two other men standing just behind, tucked into the shadows. Silent, still. Chris doesn't even have time to react. The moment they step inside, it all changes. Guns come out. The room freezes. One of the men raises his voice, not shouting, just firm. "Chris, we're not here to talk about football." His family looks on in shock, unmoving. "We're here to talk about your job at the cash center, down in the basement of the Northern Bank." Chris stands still. He can't speak. He can't move. They know. They know who he is, what he does, where he works. They even know the layout of the building. One of the men speaks again, calmly, like he's reading instructions off a card. "You're coming with us for 24 hours. Your family will stay here. If you do what you're told, they won't be harmed." He gestures toward the hallway. "Now go get your uniform, then walk out that door and get in the car that's waiting outside. Don't talk, don't look back, just move." Chris obeys. He doesn't argue. He doesn't ask questions. He walks into his room, grabs the uniform he always wears to work. He walks to the front door like a man on autopilot. Just outside, the car is already there. Engine running. Rear door open. He steps out into the night. No one says goodbye. He climbs into the back seat and lies flat on his stomach, exactly as they told him. Behind the wheel, another man waits, silent, still, a pistol resting in his lap. The door closes. The car drives off, disappearing into the quiet streets of Belfast, while Chris's family remains inside, trapped, surrounded by armed strangers, and no one has any idea what's about to happen next. 20 miles from Belfast, in a quiet County Down neighbourhood, Kevin and Karen McMullen sit by the fire, tea warm, TV humming. A calm, ordinary night. Then a knock. Kevin answers. Two men in clean PSNI uniforms stand outside. One holds a clipboard with his and Karen's names. "There's been a family incident," one says. "We need your help identifying a body." Kevin steps out without hesitation. A gun clicks against his skull. Inside, Karen sees movement too late. A third man grabs her from behind, dragging her down. She gasps, struggles, but it's over fast. They're hauled into a spare room, no shouting, just control. Guns aimed, faces to the wall. Then a voice. "Forget the bank, it's full of orange bastards. All you need to think about is your wife." Footsteps, movement, cleaning, gloves, wiping down everything. Time passes. Then one man turns to Karen. "You're going to another house. A woman will look after you." A pause. But first, the eyes. He doesn't use cloth. He uses tape. Black, electrical, strip by strip. Kevin watches, fists clenched. They take her by the arm. A car door opens, closes. She's gone, vanished into the night. What Kevin doesn't know, what no one knows, is that for the past hour someone else has been trapped in the house too. Chris Ward. He's been there the whole time, hidden in plain sight, cable ties digging into his wrists, forced to sit on a kitchen chair in the dark. His hands are pulled tight behind his back. The only light in the room comes from the open door of the refrigerator, casting a pale glow across the tiled floor. It hums quietly, almost indifferent to everything happening around it. Chris doesn't say a word. He doesn't move. He just listens to the creaks of footsteps upstairs. The sound of breathing that isn't his own. Waiting, thinking of his family. Then the door swings open. The men enter. No more hiding. No more slow introductions. They grab Chris by the shoulder. Then Kevin. Both are marched into the living room. There's no shouting. No noise. Just the cold, mechanical rhythm of men who know exactly what they're doing. Once inside, the two men are forced to stand side by side. Then comes the voice. It isn't raised. It doesn't need to be. "You have a very simple choice," the man says, his tone flat, almost bored. "You work with us. You cooperate. You follow the rules. If you do, your families live. If you don't, they die. No arguments. No negotiations. That's the deal." Silence hangs in the air. "Here's what's going to happen," the man continues. "We're going to rob the Northern Bank, and you are going to help us do it." Neither Kevin nor Chris speak. There's no point. "We'll give you instructions," he says. "Clear. Step by step. You don't ask questions. You don't make mistakes. If anything goes wrong, even once, it's not your job you'll lose, it's them. Kevin can't feel his hands anymore. His skin's gone cold, but his mind is sharp. He hears every word, every pause. And he knows now, this isn't about money. Not for him. Not anymore. This is war. And he's just been drafted. There's no way out, only forward. And the first phase is complete. In Northern Ireland, a tiger kidnapping wasn't rare. It was routine. One crime to force another. Kidnap someone, then make them steal for you. During the Troubles, it was standard. After the war, it just went quiet, more targeted. Banks, vans, homes. At Northern Bank, they tried to adapt. 2 people now needed to open the vault. Rotating identities, a safeguard. But it didn't matter, because by pure bad luck or something worse, the 2 key holders that Monday were the same 2 men being held hostage, Chris Ward and Kevin McMullen. Time doesn't move. Chris and Kevin sit in silence, minds racing. Families held somewhere in the cold. A masked man enters, drops 2 flip phones on the floor. No apps, no camera, just buttons. One marked C, the other K, 1 number each. When they ring, everything begins. Sit, the man says. They obey. A pause. Then Chris asks, "Can I get a beer?" The captors freeze. Then, surprisingly, one nods, hands him a can. He drinks. Why ask? Maybe to seem calm. Maybe to feel normal. Maybe to forget. Then the leader appears. He carries a knife. Long, curved, brutal. Karen would later call it vicious-looking. He's the only one who speaks. The others stay silent, communicating with clicks, coins, small sounds. No names, no words, just control. And in the background, cloth and spray. They're still wiping everything clean. Then the gang laid it out. Not threats, orders. Clear, cold, military style, step by step. Tomorrow, go to work like normal. Smile, nod, no signals, no slips. You'll get a sports bag. Fill it with exactly £1 million. No more, no less. Walk it out. Leave it at the bus stop, then go back in. Wait, trigger the alarm, walk out. One rule mattered most, keep the phone on. That little flip phone was more than a line, it was a leash. If anything changed, new instructions would come. If those were ignored, they didn't have to say. The man speaking was calm, experienced, like he'd done this before. Kevin and Chris said yes. They had no choice. Messing up was dangerous. Not doing it, fatal. With the plan fully locked in, sometime around 2 a.m. the men gave a final order. Get some rest, one of them said. Tomorrow is going to be a long one. They didn't need to say more. Kevin and Chris lay down in silence, minds racing, sleep nearly impossible. Somewhere out there their families were still being held. There was no way to know if they were okay. All they could do now was follow the plan. It's 11 a.m. Kevin McMullen is behind the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. Chris Ward sits in the passenger seat, quiet, holding a bag that feels heavier than it should. It's not just a work day, it's the day. Chris's shift starts at 11:30 a.m. Kevin's comes in half an hour later. On any normal morning, Chris would head straight to the machine room where he worked as a supervisor, sorting cash, checking stacks of banknotes, making sure the millions that moved through the vault each day went exactly where they needed to go. But today wasn't normal. Christmas was just 4 days away. The city was buzzing. Stores were full. ATMs were being drained. It was one of the busiest weeks of the year for cash flow. Chris wouldn't be handling just a few million. He'd be handling tens of millions. When the 2 men arrived at the Northern Bank, they moved like nothing was wrong. No panic. No hesitation. Just 2 employees walking into work on a cold December morning. They made their way to Kevin's desk where they sat for a bit, pretending to go over schedules. In reality, they were just killing time, waiting for the countdown to begin. According to the instructions, the real show didn't start until exactly 5 p.m. But before that, 3 phone calls had to be made. Checkpoints, confirmation, control. Each call wasn't just a progress report, it was a reminder, a warning, a message that rang loud even without words. We're still watching, and your families are still in danger. Every ring of that phone was a clock ticking towards something no one at the Northern Bank could see coming. At 4:30 p.m, Kevin told staff there was a cash discrepancy. He and Chris would handle it, and sent everyone home. Now only 4 people remained: Chris, Kevin, 2 guards. At 5 p.m. the heist began. They entered the basement vault, keys turned in sync, the door creaked open. Inside, stacks of cash, pounds, euros, dollars, neatly boxed, sealed, waiting. They went straight for the green boxes, freshly printed pounds. Per the gang's orders, they removed the metal seals and swapped in plain white ones. Kevin led Chris to a blind spot, just out of camera range. They filled the first bag, no counting, just fill it to the top. 15 minutes later, Chris zipped it, slung it over his shoulder and walked out. No alarms, no resistance. Outside, he made a call, got the location. He walked to a bus stop, dropped the bag by his feet. 3 minutes later, a man picked it up and left. Chris walked back to the bank. The first bag was gone, and the biggest robbery in UK history had just begun. Now just one final step remained. Raise the alarm and go home. That was the plan. Chris would finally be able to see his family again. Kevin would get to hold his wife. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare would end. But as Chris made his way back to the bank, the phone in his pocket began to buzz. He answered. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Good, the man said. You did exactly what we told you to do. Chris paused. So, what now? There was a beat of silence. Then came the answer. Now you go back inside and take more. Chris froze. He had just risked everything. He had done exactly what they asked, but it wasn't enough. What no one had realized, not Chris, not Kevin, not the staff, not the guards, was that the heist wasn't over. It had only just begun. The robbery of the Northern Bank was never meant to be a one-shot deal. It would happen in stages. And what just happened? That was only stage 1. Before we get into what happens next, we need to take a step back and understand something important: how money actually moves in and out of a bank like Northern. At the rear of the building, there's just one entrance that matters. A narrow service road called Bullen Bay Alley connects to Wellington Street. That alleyway, it's the only door through which every single pound enters or leaves the bank, and only one company is allowed to use it: Secura, a private firm responsible for armoured transport. When cash needs to be moved, it's Secura that does it. No one else gets access. The plan now was to sneak a white van into that alley and quietly pick up several large green boxes. Each box could carry close to £1 million in banknotes. But how? This is where the earlier detail comes in, the one that seemed small at the time. Back in the vault, when Chris and Kevin swapped the metal security seals on those boxes for white plastic ones, that wasn't just some throwaway instruction. That was the foundation for stage 2 of the robbery. In banking terms, a green box with a white seal doesn't mean money. It means rubbish, waste paper, something to be thrown out. That's what makes it invisible. So the new plan was this: wheel out the green boxes under the disguise of them being worthless trash, push them out through the rear shutter, load them into a waiting van, and vanish. Simple in theory. In reality, not so much. Because Bullen Bay Alley doesn't just let anyone in. You can't just show up with a van and drive inside. Only Secura trucks and certified delivery vans are allowed through, and even those have to be driven by registered staff with photo IDs. When Kevin explained this to the gang, he didn't sugarcoat it. This isn't going to work, he told them. The system won't allow it. The reply from the masked man was cold and sharp. You're the boss, aren't you? That's what you get paid for. Make it happen. Kevin didn't argue. He just turned around and walked back inside. Chris followed him straight to the vault. They opened the heavy door again and stared at what was left inside. 24 green boxes, all marked with the fake white seals. Each box held hundreds of thousands, some closer to 1 million. If they could get them all out, it would be one of the biggest bank robberies in European history. Quietly, they loaded 6 boxes onto each of the 4 metal trolleys. One by one, they wheeled the trolleys through the corridor. They passed the security room, the heart of the bank's surveillance system. 27 cameras, each recording in real time. Then came the next problem. They couldn't open the back gate themselves. It was electronically controlled from the inside and guarded. Kevin walked into the control room and saw Billy, the security officer on shift. Calmly, he told him, "There's a collection van coming in. Just some waste being picked up from downstairs. We'll need the shutter gate open." Billy blinked. No reason to be suspicious. The holiday rush meant tons of deliveries. Boxes came in and out all the time. Still, protocol required something. If the shutter gate was opened, a guard had to accompany the delivery. So Billy said, "All right, but I'll need to come with you." And just like that, the next phase of the heist was about to begin, with a guard walking beside them and no idea what he was really watching. With the route now wide open, Kevin took the lead. He pushed the first loaded trolley out into Bullen Bay Alley. Billy, the guard, walked beside him but stayed a few meters behind, casually keeping an eye on things, completely unaware of what was unfolding right in front of him. Kevin pulled out the special phone and dialed. "It's done," he said quietly. "Bring the van." 15 minutes later, the vehicle appeared. It came slowly in reverse down Wellington Street, tires crunching softly over the wet pavement. It backed up until the rear bumper was perfectly aligned with the bank's back shutter door. Then it stopped. The back doors swung open. 2 men stepped out, faces calm, movements rehearsed. Not a word said. Now, standing in that narrow alley, Kevin, Chris and Billy were face to face with the men who were about to walk away with more cash than any group in UK history. Without hesitation, the 2 men got to work. One after another, they lifted the green boxes and stacked them into the van. Heavy, solid, packed with millions. No drama, no rushing, just quiet efficiency, like they'd done this before. 24 boxes total. Inside them, freshly printed banknotes, layered and sealed. £185 million. That's not a typo. 185 million. It took exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes to remove a fortune. Once the final box was inside, one of the men turned back to Chris. No threats, no orders, just a small gesture. He handed him a roll of thick black plastic, a roll of industrial polythene. A simple message, without speaking. "We're not done yet." They were coming back. For more. The last stage of the heist was now in motion. Chris and Kevin, dazed and pale, hurried back into the vault. The adrenaline was gone. What was left behind was something heavier, like dread mixed with obligation. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. There was only one thing left to do. No green boxes this time. No neat disguise. Just them, the bags, and the raw weight of what was about to happen. They tore open rolls of thick black polythene and began stuffing them with whatever cash they could grab. Bundles of worn-out banknotes, stained euros, crumpled US dollars, anything that looked like money went in. It was chaotic, fast, desperate. The first 2 hauls had been clean, fresh, perfect. But this was the ugly part. By the time they were done, the bags held £5.1 million. No labels, no organisation, just millions buried in plastic. Then 45 minutes later, Billy's voice came over the intercom. Calm. Routine. "Kev, the van's here." Kevin froze. For a moment he didn't breathe. There were no boxes now to hide the truth. Just bags, bulging, heavy, obvious. If Billy looked, if he even peeked inside one bag out of curiosity, suspicion, or sheer boredom, everything would fall apart. There'd be questions, then alarms, then sirens. Kevin steadied himself, nodded once. He told Billy to open the inner gate. Together, he and Chris loaded the bags into a rolling metal cage and pushed it through the narrow corridor. Every step was slow, loud, like a countdown. Billy stood near the shutter door, watching, waiting. He didn't ask questions. Why would he? Kevin was his superior. This looked like waste removal, just another part of the job. They reached the van. Same alley, same quiet tension. One by one, the bags were lifted into the back. There were no jokes, no smiles, just nods and quick glances. The men moved like shadows, silent, smooth, exact. When the last bag was in, one of the men turned toward them. He didn't threaten, he didn't rush. He just said, "That's it, lads, you can go." And just like that, it was over. No alarms, no chaos, just an exit. Kevin and Chris walked back through the same doors they'd entered that morning. They climbed into Kevin's car in silence. Then they drove to Kevin's house, still not sure if their families were waiting or gone. The heist was done, and no one had noticed. "Hello, how you doing?" I actually in the Northern Bank, how much we talking?" It's 8:10 p.m. when Kevin calls the PSNI. His voice shakes. He admits the unthinkable. He just helped rob the Northern Bank. But police already knew something was off. Moments earlier, a couple spotted a white van parked strangely near the bank. It felt wrong. No crime, just instinct. They told a traffic warden. He called it in. By the time police arrived, the van was gone. The bank was quiet. No alarms, no broken doors. But inside, £26 million, gone. No signs, no sound, just silence. The PSNI launched a nationwide manhunt. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a message. In the months after, the case became one of Britain's most frustrating. Raids hit Belfast, Dublin and Cork. Doors kicked in, men arrested, millions seized, cash hidden in compost, stuffed in detergent, even burned in backyards. The police chased IRA links, gang ties, anyone shady. Then came the twist. They arrested Kevin McMullen, the bank manager. He'd called the police, told everything, but the job was too perfect, too precise. Someone inside had to help, they said, and Kevin had full vault access. They locked him up, interrogated him for a year, but nothing stuck. No calls, no transfers, no proof. In the end, they had to do the one thing they hate most, let him go. After Kevin, police turned to Chris Ward, the second key holder. He wasn't a manager, just a quiet employee who handled the staff rota. That's what raised suspicion. On the day of the heist, both key holders were on shift. Too convenient, they thought. Maybe not a coincidence. So in November 2005, Chris was arrested. His home was raided. Even his weekend job at a sports stadium was stormed by 25 police vehicles. But like Kevin, there was no evidence. At trial, prosecutors claimed Chris had changed the rota to make the heist possible. But the bank confirmed he didn't have that power. With that, the case collapsed. Chris walked free. By the end of 2005, the case had gone cold. 22 raids, 13 arrests, dozens of leads, none that stuck. Some were charged with laundering, others linked to the IRA. But the robbery itself? Nothing. No convictions, no trials, no names. And the money? Still gone. As for the hostages, both families were found safe, but scarred. Chris's family had been held at home. Karen, Kevin's wife, was taken deep into the woods. Locked in an abandoned cabin, alone. The gang promised someone would care for her. They lied. Before leaving, they smashed her car to destroy the evidence. To this day, the Northern Bank robbery remains one of Britain's greatest unsolved crimes. The Northern Bank robbery wasn't just a crime. It was an embarrassment. A humiliation for the police, the banks, and the entire justice system. £26.5 million gone. 2 families terrorised. Held at gunpoint in their own homes. 2 bank workers forced to carry out the job, while pretending everything was normal. And the people behind it vanished. No fingerprints, no faces, no trail to follow. Just a white van and an empty vault. The pressure on the police was enormous. The headlines were brutal. Everyone wanted answers. But the truth was simple and painful. They had no idea who did it. And 20 years later, they still don't. The file is still open. The case is still marked active. But in every real sense, the trail is cold, stone cold. The Northern Bank robbers used fear to get what they wanted, striking fast, leaving chaos behind. But in 1976, Albert Spagliari pulled off a heist that was the opposite. No guns, no threats, just time, patience, and a tunnel leading straight into the vault. March 10th, 1977. The sun is soft over the old streets of Nice, France. A man is being led into the courthouse in handcuffs. He's wearing a cheap suit and a camera around his neck. To most people, he just looks like someone who took too many wedding photos and never got famous for it. His name is Albert Spagliari. At this point, he's still seen as a nobody. Just another small-town weirdo with a mustache and a flashy smile. The detectives think he's harmless. Maybe a little odd, sure, but nothing to worry about. But they're wrong. Because what they don't know is that the man they just walked through the front doors is the very mind behind one of the greatest bank heists France has ever seen. A job that sounds too wild to be real. A robbery pulled off like it was written by a crime novelist, complete with tunnels, walkie-talkies, sleeping gas, and no weapons. Not a single shot fired, just silence, and then nothing left in the vault. He walked away with the modern-day equivalent of over $35 million, then disappeared like a magician, leaving behind only an empty room and a city full of red-faced police officers. From an invisible man behind a camera to the most wanted criminal in Europe. So how did he do it? Who was Albert Spagliari? And how did the cleanest crime of the century, flawless, brilliant, surgical, fall apart over something so small, so ridiculous it could have been part of a comedy? We've followed the tunnels, the maps, the lies, and the laughable mistakes. This is the story of a man who robbed a bank like it was a magic trick. This is the story of Albert Spagliari, the criminal who treated crime like art. It's the afternoon of July 19th, 1976, and something strange is spreading through the newsrooms of France. Not a headline yet, just whispers. A rumour. The Société Générale Bank in Nice has been robbed. Not a hold-up, not a quick smash and grab. No alarms, no sirens, just gone. By mid-afternoon, the streets outside the bank are in chaos. Dozens of customers are crowding the sidewalk, shouting, pointing, begging for answers. Some are crying, others are red with rage. The air smells like sweat, car exhaust, and fear. People aren't just afraid they've been robbed. They're afraid they've lost everything. Their savings, their jewelry, their inheritance, all of it. Inside the building, though, it's calm. Too calm. The police have just made it inside, and what they've found looks like a war zone, minus the blood. Hundreds of safety deposit boxes sit cracked open, some smashed in with brute force, others sliced clean open with a torch. The vault looks like it's been emptied by ghosts with welding licenses. The early estimate, 46 million francs gone. Today that's over 35 million euros. The investigators are baffled. This wasn't some junkie with a crowbar. This was precision, planning, patience. And then it gets weirder. Scattered across the floor are items no detective ever expects to see at a crime scene. A folding table, a camping stove, half-empty wine bottles, dirty pans, cans of ravioli, crumbs from baguettes. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a picnic. And on the wall, written in looping handwriting, a message in black ink. No arms, no violence, no hate. The robbers didn't just take the money, they left their manifesto. In a dark corner of the vault, an officer finds something else. A hole, carefully carved into the wall, just wide enough for one man to slide through. So he does. He crawls through a narrow space for nearly a minute, the air thick and damp. Then, suddenly, he drops into a sewer. Below the city of Nice, the robbers built a tunnel, 8 meters long, reinforced with concrete walls. No collapse, no mess, just a clean, dry escape route straight into the belly of the city. This wasn't some amateurs with a shovel. This was engineering. This was theatre. The message on the wall wasn't a joke. They hadn't used a single weapon, not even a knife. And now investigators realized something chilling. They weren't dealing with burglars. They were dealing with artists. And this was their masterpiece. Not far from the sunny hills outside Nice, in a quiet little country house, a man named Albert Spaghiari lived a peaceful life, or so it seemed. He had a small home, a loyal dog, and a wife who made strong coffee and believed in him. Albert was the village wedding photographer. He'd taught himself how to shoot and develop pictures, bought a camera and set up shop. He was good too, gentle with the bride, smooth with the guests, always quick with a joke. To everyone around him, he was just that guy, chill, quiet, a bit quirky, but harmless. What no one knew was that Albert was restless, deeply, dangerously restless. The countryside in southern France is beautiful, warm, peaceful, but to Albert it felt like a padded cell, too calm, too slow, too dull. So he started to look for sparks. First it was small bets, harmless, just fun. But gambling has teeth, and Albert let it bite. Before long he was deep in it. Gambling debts, shady friends, the usual spiral. But that wasn't the only part of him he kept hidden. Underneath the polite smile and the wedding albums, there was something else, a history that most of his neighbors couldn't have imagined. Albert Spaghiari had a past. In 1953, long before the camera, Albert was in Indochina, serving in the French paratroopers. Not exactly a model soldier, he ended up robbing a brothel. Not a smart robbery either. He got caught, and a judge handed him 5 years of hard labor. That was the first time he disappeared from polite society. A decade later, in 1962, he vanished again, this time into the ranks of the secret armed organization, a radical group that refused to accept Algerian independence. It was a dangerous, violent chapter. Explosives, weapons, political chaos. Albert got caught again. This time the judge gave him 4 years behind bars. He served his sentence in Barmetz prison, down in Marseille, and was released after 3. Then for a while, he just faded out. No more politics, no more war, no more trouble, just a camera, a quiet house, and the occasional poker game that never ended well. But the truth is, Albert was never going to settle down. His smile was too wide, his mind too quick, his nerves too calm under pressure. And deep inside, behind that lens and under that calm life, something was still ticking. So how did this ex-soldier, this gambler, this amateur photographer, end up pulling off the most legendary bank robbery in the history of modern France? Well, that part of the story is just getting started. It started with a book. One quiet evening, Albert Spaghiari sat reading a crime novel by an English writer named Tusalegu. The story was simple. A group of robbers broke into a bank vault through the sewers. No guns, no masks, just dirt, time, and a tunnel. That was it. That was the spark. Albert closed the book, but the idea stayed in his head like a fly buzzing in a jar. Days went by, then weeks, but he couldn't shake it off. By March 1976, he had made a decision. He was going to rob Nice's biggest bank, the main branch of the Société Générale, something no one had dared to try. And he wasn't going in with guns blazing. No, he had a plan. First, Albert needed to get close to the bank without drawing attention. So when he saw a newspaper ad for a commercial studio just 1 block from the building, he jumped on it. He spent every last franc of his savings and signed a 1-year lease. The perfect cover, a photography studio. Then, step by step, he started learning how the bank worked. He opened a personal account, walked in often, made deposits, made withdrawals, asked polite questions. Every time he visited, he counted how many guards were there. He watched the staff. He learned where the big deposit boxes were kept, how loud the room was during the day, how sound carried, how footsteps echoed. But there was one big problem. He still didn't know anything about the vault itself. Then, one day, a lucky break. A friend who had once worked at the bank told him something strange. The vault has no alarm system. They say the walls are thick enough, nearly 2 meters of concrete. They don't think they need one. Albert smiled. Of course they didn't. Who would ever expect to break in through the ground? He started checking out the sewer system under the bank. At night, with a flashlight and gloves, he explored for hours. Rats, filth, freezing air. It didn't matter. He was looking for one thing. Could he reach the vault from below? And after a few nights crawling in the dark, the answer was yes. The sewer line passed just 10 meters from the vault wall. It would take time and planning, but it was possible. But not for one man. Albert needed a team. Not just any group of thugs. He needed men who could keep quiet and handle pressure. So he went to Marseille, far from Nice, and pulled together 6 small-time criminals. Some had military backgrounds. All had reasons to stay low. No one in Nice knew their faces. That was the rule. In April 1976, the digging began. 10 meters doesn't sound like much, but when you're working in total silence underground, every centimeter feels like a mountain. They could only dig at night. During the day, the bank echoed like a cathedral. Any hammer tap or clink might get heard. Even at night, there were problems. 2 security guards would often sit outside the bank, smoking and chatting. If they heard anything strange, game over. So the crew used only manual tools. No drills, no power, just pickaxes, shovels, hands. To make the place livable, they brought inflatable mattresses. They laid down carpet to muffle sounds. They used rubber boats to stay dry and keep out sewer water. They ran hundreds of meters of electric wire from Albert's rented studio to power lights underground. And everything had to stay hidden. 3 months passed like this. Quiet nights, careful digging, 1 centimeter at a time. Then, on July 16, 1976, during the long Bastille Day weekend, when the city emptied for vacation, they made their move. That night, Albert and his men broke through the final wall and stepped into the vault. They didn't run, they didn't panic, they made themselves comfortable. They spent hours opening box after box. Some were smashed with hammers, others were melted open with blowtorches. They ate canned food, they drank wine, they even cooked inside the vault. It was part robbery, part dinner party. In total, they emptied 371 safe deposit boxes. The haul, an estimated 46 million francs, worth around 35 million euro today. Before leaving, they left a note on the wall. It said, "No arms, no violence, no hate." Then, just like they came, they vanished, back through the tunnel. Each of the 6 men went their separate ways. As for Albert, he didn't celebrate with, he had a dinner date. And he didn't want to be late. The plan had worked. Perfectly. For now.